So welcome you all for this webinar on artificial intelligence opportunities in the developing world. So it's first of all, let me request our chairman, National Science Foundation, Professor Ranjit Senanayake, to give you the welcome speech with regard to our event.
Yes, I am Ranjit Senaratne, right?
Ranjit Senanayake.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, Professor Saman Halgamuge from University of Melbourne, and good afternoon, our colleagues, friends, academics, and scientists joining from home. It affords us great pleasure to conduct this webinar in collaboration with the National Academy of Sciences. And here we have this immediate past president, Professor Priyan Dias, and also I see his current president, Professor Nadir Karuna, has also joined. My task is to give you a welcome address, but I like to make a few remarks at the outset. As you know, this artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly important in our day-to-day life, whether you live in a developed world or developing world. And it can contribute immensely to improve productivity, efficiency, cost management, creativity, innovation. And it has been really predicted that the contribution of AI to GDP would be around 16 trillion by 2030. Present GDP, global GDP is around 100 trillion, around 25% accounted for by USA. So this is a substantial amount, the contribution. And also in regard to realizing the goals of the sustainable development goals, this could contribute as much as 80%. So that you see its potential impact it could make. So, of course, now we have technological developing countries have some difficulties, constrained, but those will be dealt with Professor Saman during his address. What I want to briefly touch is, are we ready as a nation to go ahead with this artificial intelligence? In order to harness this potential, are we ready? Do we have a right policy, whether we have a policy framework or any pragmatic action plan? Have we even given thought to formulating an AI policy in our country? Even recently, our president underlined the need to really harness AI for national development, especially in order to make Sri Lanka developed nation by 2048, right? I think we need to really make use of this. If you look at our AI readiness, you know, USA is #1 in the world, followed by Singapore, UK, Finland, and Netherlands. Out of over 160 countries, Sri Lanka stands at the 88th position and Malaysia 36. So I think we are, our readiness index, we are low, but we have a high potential. So I think so we, now National Science Foundation, National Academy of Sciences, our universities, R&Ds, all we have to really get together with planners, policymakers, and even the government to really to formulate right policy and pragmatic action plan so that we would be able to harness this potential. Also, we are really privileged to have scientists across the globe, especially now we have Professor Saman Halgamuge, a top-notch scientist in this field. Through our global digital platform, we are connected to several high-profile scientists across the globe in AI and allied field. So we will go the extra mile to harness them. So now my task is to really welcome you. So Professor Saman Halgamuge is actually like a relative or regular who visit us virtually and also physically, and a tower of strength and pillar of support to us. So on behalf of the National Science Foundation, I wish to extend the most warm and cordial welcome. In fact, this one, though organized by the National Science Foundation jointly with National Academy of Sciences, the Science and Technology Policy Research Division, we have this 4IR working committee that is headed by Dr. Ranil Gunaratna. He has been actually at the helm in really organizing this event and has been providing necessary support and guidance. So on behalf of the National Science Foundation and also along with the Director General and Dr. Ranil Gunaratna, I wish to extend a most cordial welcome. Now we have also National Academy of Sciences past president, Professor Priyandas, who will serve as the moderator, and also introductory remarks by Dr. Ruan Veer Singh, who's also very closely working with us, and all distinguished scientists joining from different institutions in our country. And also I see young up and coming scientists also joining, a lot of interest in field. So most heartily and warmly, I welcome each and every one of you to this webinar. And I am sure this is not just, it's not just a webinar, but it's a beginning of a long journey in really laying foundation to make AI a strategic partner. Actually, nowadays data is fuel for AI, and we have actually issues with regard to data, reliable, accurate data. Some data, they are massaged, not really, they are data, not really dependable. So we need to have data. And when you talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about machine learning, and then of course, deep learning, all these things. So we have certain constraints, but we like to listen to our learned colleague and friend, Professor Saman. As a developing country, how we can really make use of this opportunity while coping and dealing with the challenges and issues we have encountered in harnessing this potential. Wishing this, I wish this important seminar great success. Thank you.
Yes, Dilush, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, sir. As the chairman very correctly mentioned, AI is a fast-moving technology and it affects to our day-to-day life in many ways. So its application can be seen in various fields like healthcare, agriculture, business, manufacturing, and even art as well. There are many opportunities as well in this field, and that is why the NSF organizes this timely webinar in collaboration with the National Academy of Sciences Sri Lanka, basically to get along with these technological advances with you. So to give a broader introduction to this webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Ruan Veer Singh, Senior Lecturer, University of Colombo School of Computing. And also Dr. Veer Singh is the chairman of the NSF Subcommittee on 4IR. So over to you, Dr. Veer Singh.
Thank you, Dilushi. Yeah. And welcome to all. It's good to see a good number at this time of the day. As the chairman of NSF said, this is a collaboration between a subcommittee within NSF and another subcommittee within the National Academy of Sciences. And I assume Professor Priyandas will say something more about that side. I am part of the what is called the Science and Technology Policy Committee of the National Science Foundation. But as the chairman said, Dr. Ranil Gunaratna is the chair of that. And together we felt there were two areas into which we need to have kind of focus groups. And so we've established two of them. One is in the 4IR, that is Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is a broad term covering several areas. And the other is biotechnology. And so we have been working during the past year, trying to see where we need to kind of develop some kind of policy briefs on related to AI. And one of the obvious things that came up was, of course, with respect to the use of tools like the generative AI tools in assessment, in student assessment. I think that's a really key thing. But today we are going to look at a slightly different area. And I'm really happy to see Professor Saman Halgamage here. He has been a constant visitor to Sri Lanka, even though he's lived his life, most of his life overseas. He's visited most of our universities and collaborated with us. I'm really happy to see him after some time. And today he's going to talk to us about opportunities for developing countries. And I think for development, and that's kind of crucial. And I think there are 150 of us here. All of us now suddenly become responsible for this as people who have been made aware, right? AI is an area such that it has a potential of increasing the digital divide, and so it's up to us who become aware to actually make sure also that others are aware, so that we can distribute the benefits of this technology equitably through the population. So you're here not to listen to me, but to listen to Professor Saman. So I will hand you to Dilushi to proceed with the talk itself.
Thank you, Dr. Veerasinghe, for your informative introduction. Then let me invite Professor Priyan Dias, Emeritus Professor, University of Moratuwa. Now, Professor Dias is the former president of NASSL, National Academy of Sciences, Sri Lanka, and also a committee member of the NSF Subcommittee on 4IR. Professor Dias will introduce our resource person today, and he will moderate the session from here onwards. Over to you, Professor.
Right. Thank you, Dilushi. So I'm afraid you have to listen to me also before listening to Saman. Just a few words about the National Academy of Sciences of Sri Lanka, which is not as well known as the NSF. So actually, I'm representing the president, Professor Nadira Karunaveera, who is a senior professor of parasitology at Colombo Medical School. Now, the National Academy is made up of scientists across a range of disciplines, including the social sciences also. Fellows of the Academy are nominated by others and then elected into fellowship. We like to think that we are the apex scientific body in the country and that we model ourselves along the Royal Society. But of course, we have some way to go before we achieve that kind of stature. Anyway, the reason I was quite interested to promote this among the fellows of the Academy and others also is that, someone, when he talked to me initially, mentioned that this was more to do with applications in different areas. And therefore, it could, even though we are not computer scientists, many of us, or IT specialists, maybe we are able to use this technology in our everyday research. And I think some of you may have got an email from me which said that in these days in Sri Lanka, when it is increasingly difficult for funding agencies and universities and research institutions to find money to conduct experimental research, that maybe this kind of data-driven research may be something that, we could go into. I'm sure someone might say something about that as well. But let me introduce him. So, of course, he's a renowned expert in the field of AI, machine learning, optimization, and big data analytics. And of course, numerous accolades he has got for his research. Many of us here know about this top 2% of most cited researchers, and he has been included in the Stanford database for artificial intelligence and image processing. So he's a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering of the School of Electrical, Mechanical and Infrastructure Engineering at the University of Melbourne, and also honorary professor at Australian National University, Tongji University, which is in Shanghai, I think in China, and the Institute Technology Bandung. So his CV indicates that he has supervised 50 PhD students and 16 postdocs, and about 20 of these PhD students being graduates of Sri Lankan universities. He has held several leadership roles, including Head of School of Engineering at the Australian National University and Associate Dean of Engineering and IT at the school at Melbourne University. So before I hand over to him, I would just like to reiterate what Ruwan said earlier about, I think, Saman being a genuine friend of Sri Lanka and its academics. He has visited us many times, talked to us about various things, analyzed for us things like, for example, our own publication records and done comparative analysis across different universities. So he has been a great resource for the academic community in Sri Lanka. So thank you, Saman, for agreeing to do this. And I hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Priyan, for that generous introduction, and Ruan and Ranjit, all friends. And I feel very comfortable seeing my friends here. And it is good afternoon for you and a good evening, you said to me, and because it's evening here. So I first get my slides up and running, and I guess you can see my slides in a normal.
Yeah, that's fine. It's in full screen.
Okay. All right. I am not going to talk about myself, and I'm going to talk about how this AI can be used in developing world. And I may not be referring to Sri Lanka in particular because I want to be honest. So I will be referring to developing world. And I had a chat yesterday with my PhD student currently in Kenya. And he has given me some more insights from what is happening in Africa. So he's working on AI for energy and focusing on African continent. And I've also worked in Indonesia and on developmental project in energy. So there are two advertisements before I go on. And so the first one is about the place I work, University of Melbourne Faculty of Engineering and IT. So, but I put this advertisement to show you just two names. So these are the top 4 people in my faculty. And you can see Deputy Dean Research, familiar name, and Deputy Dean Academic, familiar name. So they are from Sri Lanka originally. So you can see the caliber of people that Sri Lanka produce. And so this is the leadership of the faculty. And of course, if you're interested, you can see the ranking and other things of the University of Melbourne, and particularly my Faculty of Engineering and IT. The second advertisement is this catchy phrase I coined when I was in China last week, giving a keynote at their construction machinery forum. So I said, as an engineer, I love machines because it's a conference about machines, but I love humans more. So I said that it means quite a lot in many ways. So here I put this phrase to tell you that AI must be regulated, and there are some really good, interesting actions taken by European community. The Artificial Intelligence Act is one of them, and it has a majority, as far as I can see, in European Parliament. So by the end of the year, we might see the Artificial Intelligence Act pass through. It will protect people from the misuse of AI, discrimination that you can include in data that will be used by AI. So as Professor Ranjit said, and so the data, you know, if we work with data, so what we are trying to do is to get the knowledge inside the data. And if that data is created in a discriminatory setting, so of course your AI system will discriminate. So, and we have so many examples of that, and therefore this act would be quite interesting to be adopted throughout the world. All right, so advertisements are over, and now I want to say this is the outline of my talk, and very gentle introduction to 21st century AI and what do we expect, and the directions of AI. I can see how things are moving, and then I will talk a little bit about fair AI and social responsible AI that my lab is focusing on. And the elephants in the room, you probably guessed what I'm going to talk about. And then I will talk about the AI strategy for developing countries. And I'll take lots of examples and 2 or 3 examples from my own lab as well. So again, my experience in working on AI in developing countries are mostly on Indonesia in the past. and because I got funded projects to work on Indonesian islands, and currently on Kenya and a little bit of Uganda as well. My student is currently traveling between Kenya and Uganda. Okay, so this is a bit of a teaser. So ChatGPT, everyone is talking about this tool, and which can solve problems. And so I asked this tool, in which countries do we have my first name? So now I was not expecting it to be perfect, but it is not too bad. And so Iran, that's correct. Saman is extremely common name in Iran. And Afghanistan, yes. Sri Lanka, so it says it's a common surname, which is not correct. But I know Saman is a surname in Iraq, Kurdistan. So they get mixed up, the data. So Pakistan, Indonesia, and it misses Thailand. Thailand also has my first name as a name. So these tools are not perfect, but they are good enough to impress us. So that is what matters. So it's the students who are trying to use ChatGPT to answer their questions need to be careful, because some of these answers could be incorrect. So now to talk about what do I expect AI to move on, because when we talk about AI in the developing world, we need to understand where is AI heading, because we need to bypass quite a lot of old AI. We don't have to adopt old AI, because that people have used it, and now there's the most modern AI is what we need to adapt and use. So straight to jump to the most current AI, and that is what I'm going to talk about here in this slide. So what type of AI future we do not want? So obviously we do not want AI that cannot explain its actions. So I think if you're working in AI, you know what I'm talking about. This is the big area called explainable AI. AI cannot be a black box. It has to tell me why it is making the decision not to pass the bank loan for the customer X. I need to know why, right? It cannot say, based on my experience, I have made that decision. You trust me. I can't accept that. So AI that is secretive and not transparent is part of that. So if it cannot explain, if it is secretive, I do not want that sort of AI in future. So AI that cannot learn as we go. So I want AI to learn and get better. That to some degree we have achieved, but there's a lot more to be done in that space. And people who work in AI would recognize this as continuous learning. AI that can harm humans / world. We don't want such AI. AI that can go out of control or outsmart us. We definitely do not want that sort of AI. So this is what we do in my lab. And so this yellow box called FAIR AI, and we call it FAIR because fair, accessible, interpretable, and reproducible AI, social responsible. And that is what we are working on. And these two axes, I'm not going to explain too much, but the x-axis here is about accessibility. We want everyone on the planet who needs AI to access and use AI without calling the AI experts. So it has to be readily useful. And this is where the regulation is so important. And the y-axis is the interpretation. Interpretation of AI can be at different levels. So it can be at highest level, so that that means linguistic level, so that the lawyers, the psychologists, and social scientists can actually read why this AI is doing these, making these decisions. But it can also be mathematical, so that the scientists and physicists can understand the model it uses. And so there's a whole lot of research. And so pretty much my entire research life, I am heading towards that yellow box and on the right-hand side. And the current state of AI mostly is this purple dot, okay? So I think that is the best way to explain what I'm doing in my research. And and if you are interested, this paper can be searched and found, and it is a conceptual explanation of what I think the AI would be in 21st century and some of our work. All right, so now the curious slide that you have been waiting for. The elephant, I took plural here, elephant in the room, so you know the phrase. So these are the not so comfortable true things, right? And so let me start and by saying that if you look at the developing world, and in most cases, the governments are the very reason for the current situation. So I told you that I'm talking in general terms, and my experience is in Africa and in Indonesia. So their involvement must be considered very carefully. So if we are talking about AI in developing world, we have to depend on governments and government institutions for some instance, to some extent, but our target should be outside the government. Okay, I will talk about that later. So I mentioned two things: industry and the higher education / training sector. So, and then if you're honest, and people selected the governments in most cases, right? And so they may be infected with the same disease as the government are impacted by, right? But at the same time, so when we talk about AI in developing world, and we know that the primary beneficiaries of these good things we want to do with AI would be the people, all right? So these are, not so comfortable truths. And I promise you that I only have 2 slides and then I will not talk about it. But I just put them here so that I know what you know, okay? Since we have one world, so this is a bit harder to explain. So since we are living in one world, okay? So you can say country X has a sovereignty and don't meddle with our affairs. That's all true, right? But what a country does with the following will impact other countries. So they cannot be just observers. Okay, so this is the reality. I'm not supporting this, but I'm saying that this is the reality. Environment, including human-created pollution on land, sea, and air. So if a country pollutes and other countries also feel it. I remember that once I went to Taiwan, to an institution I collaborate with. The entire time I was very upset and uneasy because of the smoke. The smoke coming from the wildfires or some sort of control fires from Indonesia. So now whatever they do in a neighboring country can impact your country and so on. So you are not completely independent in that way. So treatment of the marginalized, well, I mean, you can say our country can treat whatever the way our people. It's not your problem. It's not true. It is your problem too. So both people rocking the governments in other countries as they depend on the perception of their voters. So and that impact other countries. So they won't be just observers. This is the reality. And any country cannot depend on the monies of taxpayers from other countries, all right? So I'm getting to the last couple of things I want to say here. And if it becomes too expensive, the other countries will meddle with your affairs, all right? There's another elephant in the room. So then this might be true for some countries. You may have large amount of reserves, advantages other countries may not have. It's very unfair, but they will meddle with you if we have that. And we see that in the world everywhere happening, okay? Some of these things are unfair, but that is what is happening. All right, so vulnerability creates freedom, addressing all the elephants in the room. So, and it is from Apple Podcast. I've cited this. So let us move now to what I want to talk about. So what I said here is I know, you know, and these are the elephants in the room that people don't talk about, but I now mentioned that in a very generic way. I'm not particularly targeting a country X or country Y, okay? So now when I talk about AI in developing countries, I thought I would start with a high level view on what is required, what should be done. And the first and foremost thing is the access to AI, the most modern AI. So democratize access to all technologies, including AI, at the same time as the rest of the world. I think that is very possible now. So what you need is a really good internet service. So because especially in AI, whenever we publish papers, we put them in archive, we make them available. And maybe my friends may recall 10, 15 years ago, and you had no access to papers because the universities in developing countries may not subscribe to some large databases at the time. And then sometimes I get the request, okay, can you send me this paper, and so on, right? And I remember when I was a student, I got postcards coming from Cuba. I know they are from Cuba because the postcard size is so small, asking for certain papers that I wrote when I was a PhD student in Germany. So now that such things are now cleared because you have access to all the papers we write. And because we put them most of the time in free databases, and not only us, and even the big companies like Google straight away publish on databases. Okay, so access, so this is doable, right? No one in a developing country should not have access to the most modern methods in AI. So they may not have access to the most modern computing machinery or computing equipment, but the actual algorithms, methods accessible. So the second one is the be smart. So ability to train and retain experts. So it's both are important. So only some problems cannot be solved by technology alone. So that's a bit convoluted. And you need to think about this. How do we be smart? So we have to include AI in our training and higher education institution, not just in engineering and IT. All right. And if you look at the AI tools that are coming up, even in arts and humanities, sculpture, and you could use AI tools, right? So if you want to support creativity in all areas, so AI is enabling technology in multiple areas. It's not just in technology and engineering and IT and businesses. And they may be the first to go into AI, but the impact of AI should be felt in almost all domains. All right. So be smart means we have to provide that training and in developing countries, that because that is like enabling them, right? So now the downside of it, not downside, but the other side of that coin is, and when people are trained and they may go away, they may leave, right? So now there should be other mechanisms that you have to put in place so that even if they go, that they come back and help the developing country, because you can't restrict someone's personal freedom, but people who go there and come back to the developing country and help, right? And because it's difficult to not to do that. So I think I make some suggestions in social media how this can be done. I don't want to put that into this talk, but you can provide them something, token gesture, so that they will actually return some of these skills that they gain overseas back to developing countries. So the third one is a very important one. So how do we actually use AI to outsmart the fraudsters? Because I truly believe that developing countries will no longer be developing countries if we actually can limit the corruption and the fraud and everything around that, people gaming the system. So one argument could be that if you do not game the system, well, then you're done. So you will never succeed. Well, that argument comes with not having a functioning system, right? So we can talk about that for hours, but outsmart the process is an important aspect, and AI can actually help with that quite effectively. So the three things at a very high level, and now I want to go a little bit more into some specific concerns. So if you look at the developing world, no matter where it is, you can see women, children, and minorities at the receiving end. I'm not talking about, all of them, but if you look at the people who are most affected, and you can see such communities. So the social responsible AI can actually make these things more aware, because it's very hard to talk about these things as humans, right, in the same country. But if you have and some sort of social responsible AI tools and figuring out, comparing status of women, children, minorities of country X with country Y, and you might be even better off than a developing country. You can be proud of some aspects, but you may not be as good as other countries. So what I'm saying here is the AI can be created in a way that it can be somewhat independent judge of certain things. So you may have an excuse to say, hey, the AI tool tells me this. Of course, we take it with a pinch of salt, but it is a view that can trigger a conversation. Okay, so letting corporate greed determine the fate of our countries, well, that is a big problem, because some very good companies or good companies, you have to ask whether they are really good, behave differently in developing countries. They can't do the same thing here, all right, where I live. But they go to developing countries and do certain things that no one can be proud of. All right. So how do we actually stop that? And today we can stop that certainly than 10, 15 years ago. I think you remember what happened in India, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, how many people died with the chemical disasters. And content creation with visuals, social responsible AI again, can help interpreting the unpleasant sceneries, right? So in AI tools are there which can look at certain scenes and provide text. This is just an example, okay? But there are a lot more you can do to expose some of these things, because if a human being come and say, hey, the company X is doing in the country Y is really not good for the environment, well, that is a person saying it. But what I'm saying is there should be an independent AI tool that we can feed this information into, all right? Content creation and with visuals, we put them in and then it gives its opinion. So it's a bit like the ChatGPT, but in a more targeted to a certain things. Rights violated, rule of law is not applied equally. Rule bending is commonly practiced in several countries in developing world. And how do we actually, counter that? And I have no answers, but I can tell you some examples. So I heard a talk given by one of the founders of GANs, right? AI tool, let me say, because I'm not trying to explain that here. It's a generative AI tool, still very popular. And I heard him saying in a seminar that he actually worked on GANs during Trump time to make faces of protesters blur, because he feared that those faces will be recognized under Trump in the US. And he was working towards that. So he publicly said that probably about 1.5, 2 years ago in a seminar. So there are technological things you can do to make technology stand up, because it's sometimes dangerous for people to stand up. Okay, people are reluctant to do that, but someone has to stand up. So you can actually get the technology to very carefully and independently stand up and support good people who do not want that to happen, but still do not have the courage to stand up by themselves, okay? So that's what I'm saying here. Corruption everywhere. So that's another thing we talk about. All right, I had lunch with the publisher a couple of days ago, and we speculated about a tool, a ChatGPT corruption indicator. Well, of course, I mean, I can't make it, you can't make it, but a company like OpenAI can make it. straight away release it in the internet. You cannot, it's there, people use it. You can't do much about it, right? So corruption detection tool, that is possible using current AI. So some company, someone has to do it. Someone with a quite large number of lawyers protecting the company should do it. Brain drain, how do we address that? They are all very tough problems, right? Creating lucrative AI jobs in the country is already happening in Sri Lanka. I know that. And very well salaried jobs are created in the AI sector. And because you can actually create AI without going to the actual company, you can work from home, you can do a lot of good things. So how do we actually create atmospheres for very smart people to stay back and do that? I know a couple of people who do that, right? They will never relocate to another country because they're doing so well by being in Sri Lanka, for example. All right, I have no comments on this illegal drugs and alcohol abuse. How do you use AI? We can speculate, all right? So just a few examples on the technology, and particular things like AI can be very nicely used and to create various algorithms, various tools that can actually break the deadlock we have in multiple developing countries, okay? So common pattern signatures of corruption across developing as well as so-called rich countries. I'm not saying that the so-called developed countries are corruption-free. There are corruption. So can we actually use some common patterns? So we know the common patterns, and then can we actually train machine learning algorithms and which can actually detect there is potential corruption on this particular issue based on the information you provide, okay? Facts, of course, right? And I think you can do that. So for example, the country that I currently work with, I don't want to name that country, I can say that's an African continent, was given a huge loan to create, to electrify certain area, okay? So now I was sent photos by someone, and they have cables, unprotected cables near the trees. Of course, that was not what was funded, all right? The project was properly funded at the time, but between that funding amount and the actual implementation, a lot of money got wasted, and corruption, unbelievable level of corruption. That is why you can see a cable without protective cover near a tree. That's not the funder's fault, okay? But that's clear corruption. So just that image and few images like that are good enough for a tool to straight away accuse whoever implemented that project that this is a corrupt action, for example, okay? So now then there are other areas, so supervised learning. If you are in AI, you know what I'm talking about, because there are examples that you can use to identify corruption. Exploratory learning to discover new and evolving patterns of endogenous corruption. So this is difficult because this level of corruption never happened nowhere in the world. It only happened in country X only. Nobody knows. So how do you find that out? So there is a learning in machine learning called exploratory learning, unsupervised learning. There are no examples, but you understand there's something fishy, something not correct, right? So now detection of odd behaviors to create an unconfirmed list of potentially suspicious corrupt activity. Autoencoders, we are using autoencoders to find out faults of machines that we don't know which faults are, but we know that it is not a good machine. So autoencoders, if you know machine learning, and variational autoencoders and different varieties of it, the entire research area, and you can actually pick the odd behaviors, not necessarily corruption, but not the normal behavior that you would expect, okay? Very easy to do, right? someone has to do it. Okay. And so now continuing with my conversation with my friend publisher I had lunch with, and we both agreed that if we are going to do this, then we have to find another planet to live. Okay. Because it's not going to be easy, but a big company with code like OpenAI can do that, right? So now focus on large-scale corruption, anonymous people reporting platform. So that is a bit like creating a multimodal platform that can pick these things. Anonymous people report, news analysis, print, social media, intentional gossip detection, because sometimes you create a fake news to divert attention. A fake news is completely wrong, right? So someone could create that fake news in the protection of a parliament or whatever, and to divert the attention. So people are now going after that, and while you're doing your business, all right? Intentional gossip detection. All right, so I'm not taking one particular example or not, and I'm just saying that this is possible. That can be detected. Multimodal information integration for verification. So all these different types of integration can be, information can be integrated. So AI does that, and we do these things, right, in real life. So now I'm taking this diagram because I'm talking about supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and the whole lot in between, all right? I'm not going to explain this, but these are the sort of this triangle of learning that AI actually can do. And so this dot is the supervised learning, this dot is unsupervised learning, and there's a whole lot of in between. So current AI is capable of doing it. All right, enough about elephants, enough about corruption, and let's go to something more productive to talk about. And how do you create a strategy for your own country? So I can only think of the countries I know. So I can make it very easy by saying that there are two things I want to see in that strategy. So how can AI enable local talent to be successful in the international market? Okay, so I think I mentioned earlier, so my priority, if I were to create a policy on AI for a developing country, and my priority would be to leave the government slightly at the, not at the center. Government, of course, has to create the strategy and be responsible for that. But at the same time, I do not want government to be involved quite a lot. And it should support local entrepreneurs to actually grow up and be successful in the international market. If you want examples, very easy. See what is happening in India and see what is happening in China. Because these are live examples I see. I give you one example. I have a friend in China who came to me as a PhD student, and now he's a full professor and an entrepreneur. Okay, so his products are sold in Europe. So his products are sold in Europe, and I visited his company, and it's a joint venture between the professors group and the university and the government. So there is a supporting scheme to help them. AI skilled entrepreneurship are the non-technology aspects covered too. There are non-technology aspects that you need to look at, because I don't want to play down the prospect of some people losing jobs when you introduce AI. Of course, it will happen. So then how do we retrain them, and how do we reuse them, and how do we actually create them a livelihood? And that is important with any technology, any introduction of any technology. So the second thing at my heart here, and I want to see in any strategy of AI, and is how can AI change all aspects of life locally? The first one is money earning, international market, being successful, bringing in foreign exchange. But the second one is actually, how do we increase the quality of life locally? Would people feel more comfortable with the solutions we are proposing? Can people create AI-based solution for local problems? And there are examples. Okay, so there are examples currently happening in Kenya, but also in countries like Philippines, the local innovation you can see, right? Not necessarily in AI, but generally in technology, right? So these two aspects, one is outwards, creating opportunities for local talent to successfully bid in international markets. And secondly, and using AI to change the lives of the people locally. They both are important. So in a strategy, and it is also important that this AI does not discriminate, and we need to build skills and capacity, and that means supporting education and training providers. This is a bit of a difficult one, creating critical technology and infrastructure, and that has to happen. And if you go to India, you will see the sophisticated technology created, probably at times even more sophisticated technology than what we have access to here. And they're not very common, but they create a couple of these centers and that you could go and use when it is required, right? So this has to be creating critical technology and infrastructure, and you need government to support it or big industries to support it, or industry university collaboration, grants. So now potential change management or identify restructuring needs. I mean, we can't just say that won't happen. So just like with the introduction of any technology, if you introduce AI, it's possible that some jobs are going to be obsolete, right? So you need to be aware of it, okay? And then you need to take actions and have plans for that. All right, so I move forward. So I said that there are two sectors that I would target in a developing country. One of the reasons is it's the least corrupt sectors. One would be private enterprise, entrepreneurs, companies. They want to earn profit, that's fine, okay? Just stay legal and earn your profit and compete in international market, provide quality solutions for local population to get better. We would appreciate you. And the other area is higher education sector. And higher education sector or training sector, we need to support. And because they produce people who would actually be employed in these companies, which then create wealth for the country, okay? So I am simplifying this just to bring it across. So you need to take care of the training, and then you have to take care of the entrepreneurship. In that strategy, you should support both. And you have plenty of examples, okay? Fantastic examples. India, not only India and China, but also Vietnam, okay? And you need to see how they do it, right? And catching up, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and they all are catching up. Particularly in the next 10 years, you will see how these countries come forward with some of the strategies in place right now. So strategy part 1, 2, that's one is for the training, the other one is for industry, supporting entrepreneurship, as I talked about. Okay, so now I don't want to go through all of that, but there is quite a lot of room to internationally compete. And the local application is one, the international contracts is another one. Some of these things nobody thought of, right? So do you think that they got the baggage handling, conveyor belt management right at the airports? I don't think so. So you need to just go and see how they work, and they sometimes ignore the human behavior in it. So AI can do something because AI can be programmed to capture the human behavior, just some cameras and capture the human behaviors. And then AI can even make some suggestion. How do we change this? So in a particular example is when the bags come in a conveyor belt at the airport, some people, it's cultural as well, some people go and stand just next to the belt, covering the view for all the others. So everyone was trying to go there, all right? And that create completely inefficient system. So how do we actually change that? Because in some countries, I have seen the conveyor belts are circular. So it's going around and around, right? So maximizing simply the exposure to the people. So I think there could be better designs. So I had a chat with Professor Priyan earlier, and the design is an area where AI can be very nicely applied. And some of the local problems that you can solve could be design problems with AI, okay? Just giving a clue here and there, but I'm not giving you solutions here. So now a big area where the AI can help is a sustainable energy and transportation. And this is an area that I have some experience on working with in Indonesia, and now we are trying to do some work in Kenya. Now here you are, the green window of opportunity. That is what the international organization tell us. Now the developing countries ask legitimate questions, right? Why green? Why us? Why renewables? Why should we do that? Why do we care about the environment already partially destroyed by rich countries while they were busy getting rich? You can ask these questions. But the answer is what was done is done. Okay. So we have to ask the rich countries who polluted the world to provide sufficient compensation. Right. But the answer is not that we also encourage developing countries to destroy the rest of the world. That's not the answer. So there are two fronts here. So the green window of opportunity is created because of that, because the wealthier countries provide sometimes, not all the time, sufficient funding for developing countries to become greener. So it's a green window of opportunity to jump across all the dirty technology solutions and straight go to the renewables. But there are vested interest preventing that. And so this is a problem that technology cannot solve, unfortunately. Not directly. I talked about the tool for corruption, remember? A ChatGPT corruption tool, but if it ever come to fruition. And so there are certain things AI can do to change things in an unimaginable way. So I think we need to push the right buttons to get there. So here's an example, and UN Commission on Science and Technology just last year, and provided some funding and gave this message: more productive green windows of opportunity. So rural electrification. So there's no electricity, you go in there and support solar panels, and then people can see the advantage of having some electricity at your coffee shop or grocery store, and you can listen to watch TV or whatever. So you can see the advantage of having some electricity. And the problems are, you will be surprised to hear as we in the next couple of slides, problems are not so understandable if you are not in a developing country and actually in a rural community and talking to them. Now here is the good news. So electric boda bodas are motorcycle taxis in Africa, well known, right? So now there is a project. The government is trying to change the boda bodas to electric boda bodas, right? Boda bodas, I don't know where the name come from, but I think the motorcycles sound like boda bodas. That may be the case. I have no idea. So here is an example where the entire family of 6-7 people riding on such a bicycle. And here is a place on the bottom right-hand corner. It says charging station. So my student Will just went, after I had chat with him, he went to a charging station and had a chat with people. So they do exist. So these are for boda bodas, for the electric motorcycles in Uganda, Kenya, okay? But it's also a little bit of propaganda there. So they might not be doing what they say they are doing, but it's happening. So converting the motorcycle taxis, because it's a culturally appropriate solution, because people are already using these motorcycles, readily using everywhere. What you're doing is just changing them to electric motorcycles, okay? And showing them that it is cheaper, financially, and it is good for the environment, depending on how dirty the electricity you create, right? I have to say that too. So if the electricity you create is clean, it's good for the environment. All right, so this is my student currently in between Kenya and Uganda. So he's looking at Kenya, 71.4% electrification, Uganda, much less. It's a PhD project, the AI and sustainable energy and transportation, and focusing on African continent. And we are also supported by Enline, a company, and a startup from UC Berkeley and in United States and in France. So we are actually talking to them and getting their data because they create a special sensor, and that will detect some of the usage patterns of electricity in these countries. So this co-supervisors are Elizabeth from ANU and Julian previously from IBM. It's funded by Australian Research Council. So not only this project, but quite a lot of application in AI. So these are slides from Will. And so now interesting thing, I said that sometimes it's not common sense. We think that there's always electrification would be welcome. That's not the case. That's surprising, isn't it? So there is a case for no electrification in some areas. Can AI make any difference, right, to change that? And we think what is good for them, right? That's not fair. They think it's not good for them, all right? So increasing grid expansion will increase economic development. We think that it's common sense for me personally, but that's not the case. So that means there's something wrong. So if you go and see why, because sustainable electrification means that someone has to pay for it, right? You can't give it for free. Someone has to pay for it. If you don't have paying customers, you can't electrify a region, right? So electricity revenue cannot cover maintenance. Increased maintenance is partially due to corruption. So electricity is so expensive. So we're coming back to the elephant in the room, right? You can't electrify the community because it is not sustainable, because they can't pay the prices because prices are too high. Why the prices are too high? Because in between, there's a whole lot of corruption, okay? The maintenance is corruption. So in developing countries, electrification does not always mean economic development, right? So now what the companies do is quite interesting. The companies, if they get a grant to implement, to electrify an area, they see how this can be profitable, right? Companies are there to make profits, right? So you can't rely upon the government because the government is corrupt. Now you go to companies, the companies need profit. So they can't make profit because people don't use electricity enough because they don't have electric devices. So now you have to ask people to use electric devices. So this is completely, a mess. So the profits are actually stopping the way forward. So corruption is stopping the way from one side, and the profits are stopping the way from the other side, okay? Because this is how things work. So for example, cooking, of course, the tasty this way for us, but it's not so tasty for the environment, right? So how do we actually get people to use electricity or gas or whatever it is, but not wood from the, jungle? Maybe it is okay to use it, right? Maybe it is sustainable, but if it's unsustainable, how do we change that? We can't change it. The community adoption is poor because you have access to wood for free. So why would you buy electric infrastructure and pay for the electricity and cook that way? All right. So lots of problems. So then the companies think about, all right, can we actually use the carbon credit to get some money from somewhere so that we can give these things for free? All right. So this dynamics is observed by my student, who is flabbergasted, because we never expect that to be the case, okay? So there's quite a lot of discussions happening between my PhD student and various companies at the moment. How AI can impact microgrid adoption. So this is another problem. And so one solution is this boda to go electric, right? That means it's already there. So now we have a cheaper solution. So these are the types of solution we need to find in developing countries. You use the motorcycles to transport people. So can we actually give them a solution to use electricity, and which is cheaper for them, therefore they will take it. And at the same time, that will support the microgrids to be sustainable. So now you can actually bring in a microgrid in a rural area, and bodas will make sure that it is sustainable. And now you can tell people, okay, now you have the ability to watch your TV and cook using electric power if you want to, and so on and so on. Okay, so now I give you a taste of what is actually happening, and because there are a few sides to these stories, not just the corruption in one way, the profits of companies in other way. Okay, all right. So this is the company I mentioned, who is actually doing pretty good job and actually getting data to us using sensors implemented. There are lots of stories which I'm not going to share with you right now, but this is this is how the power, electrical power varies. And some of the devices that we could supply this community wouldn't survive, because this is how the grid varies. Even if there's a government grid, they can't use it, right? And then if the device fails, and then they say they stop using it, they stop buying it, so it won't work, all right? There are lots of aspects to it. And how do we use AI? So AI can be used to stabilize the grid, and in a very interesting way. So that is how we actually source research problems that we try to solve, that can change the lives of the developing world. Okay, so now I'm jumping to a second task here. So I talk about transportation and energy and how AI can be used there to help developing countries a little bit. But this is something that can be used everywhere, because how do we actually recognize counterfeits? So if you look at these pictures being generated, they are not real. They're generated human-like images, AI-generated images, okay? They look so real, and you and I can't see the difference. We will say they are real humans, but they're not, okay? So I'm not going to talk about the AI involved in it, vision transformers, diffusion models, blah, blah, blah. But how can we use this? You can use it for counterfeit detection. One problem the developing countries may have is the reputation. I heard politicians talk about it. Our reputation is tarnished, and we need to improve our reputation as a corrupt-free country which actually produces genuine goods, all right? So, for example, Sri Lankan tea is as genuine as it can be. There are no fake Sri Lankan tea as far as I can see, unless they change the label and buy some cheap tea from somewhere. So tea produced in Sri Lanka are usually top quality, genuine tea. Okay, so some brands are better than the others. Now, generative models is the entire AI area that we work with. So I just put this slide, but I'm not going to explain that. But what it says is that it can generate fakes, okay? It can generate fakes, but now our research is to see, can we actually detect such fakes, okay? It's Nike original and the fake. This perfume looks exactly the same, smell exactly the same, but how do you know which one is fake? Okay. And then there is a famous chocolate that is being it's considered as most counterfeit chocolate in the world, right? And it's so good that the fake is as good as the real one for normal people, okay? So now it reduces countries' reputation. So this is where some of our research just submitted about a week ago. And at the same time, we released the paper for the public. So on arXiv, and all the codes released, people can use it. We call it undercover deepfakes, detecting fake segments in videos. So led by a postdoc and a bunch of PhD students in my group, and in collaboration with a similar research group in Singapore, right, in US. So now this is a bit of advertisement for my student, one of my newest student, and he's working on deep fake recognition. And Ken is from a top-class university from China. And AI is also used commonly in manufacturing and automation. We can't ignore that. And if Sri Lanka manufactures something, tea or whatever products, an AI should be incorporated in it. Okay, so it's not for the sake of it, but because it truly, truly improves your quality. And this is an example. So you know that currently the world's richest person is the Amazon's top person. And by the way, I have a former PhD student, Ken Steer, who works for Amazon, and he's a mechatronic engineer. So the Amazon has this smart warehousing system. They call it a symphony between humans and machines. It's actually semi-automation. It's not full automation or full manual operation. So they achieve this sort of efficiency through semi-automation. There are some issues, right? There are issues like there are people being hospitalized because you have to work with machines. So there may be accidents that happen, all right? It's not all positive. But in terms of efficiency, they have a clever semi-automation system, and AI is everywhere. So if you have a certain address, you order a product A, and the system take a note of it, and then they bring this product A for people like you and store it there, expecting that you're going to reorder that, okay? So all sorts of AI is at work supporting their business. And here, the quality control on what people wear. Are people wearing safety vest? So there are very common applications of AI, which is used in everywhere in the world, and they can be used in Sri Lanka or any other developing country as well. All right, autonomous driving. So I can't imagine how it would work in Sri Lanka, but you know, it is slowly becoming a reality, right? Autonomous driving. So it's there on the road. It's already a reality on rail, but I'm talking about on the road. Okay. So, and increasingly, there are more and more computer vision applications. And so this is about certain detection of solar panel faults or solar panel of most efficient areas. So you can actually hotspots, really good, too much sunlight is there, or it's a defect area. So all these things, there are lots of apps right now, AI-based, that can be applied, used in smartphones, okay? So quality control in electronic manufacturing, I was personally involved in a very early version of using AI in this when I was a PhD student. And so this is about finding faulty electronic goods. And this is my PhD paper, and I close to 400 citations. And so in 1994, I used explainable AI without naming it because I did not know to call it explainable AI. And of course, with the competing available there, so we actually came up with some really nice application for data provided by Siemens in Germany, and 99% accuracy with 40% less computation, thanks to explainable AI, or AI that can explain its own decisions, okay? So now interesting, and this work, 26 years later, and slightly modified, but applied to a new problem and the stock market. We work with a group in China and came up with this really nice paper in May 2020, and we were so lucky because during the pandemic, apparently people read this paper a lot. So we have 150 citations in a very short time. I think we were a bit lucky on this as well. Okay. All right. So the computer is breaking up when we talk about stock market. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. So when we look at this, and AI and computer vision are effectively used in medical research. All right. And about half of my lab actually works in this area, medicine, biology, and applying AI. So when you look at local problems in developing countries, there are things we can do with AI. Malnutrition of children. What are the inexpensive and attractive local solutions, tasty local food that can be made using locally acquired ingredients? This is already happening, okay? This is already happening in developing countries. They invent new, nutritious local food created using local ingredients. This is research, food research. You can actually use AI to support this. And aged care. Quality care is rare and expensive in developing countries. So effective home nursing could be a culturally acceptable solution. So how do we support effective home nursing, use AI-based solutions? Of course, there should be a nurse, a sister or human involved in it. But can we also use AI to support this? So what I'm talking about here is you use AI in a very productive way, aligned with social norms and cultural norms, right? Of course, we would like to change some of them, but that's a different fight, okay? But when you talk about AI currently for local solutions, mosquito menace, potential practical solution for the tropical countries, clean water, for some countries, this is increasingly becoming a problem with the population growth. And some of the work we do in the cancer area, so a PhD student working in a tumor recognition system together with Australia's, I would say, foremost cancer research hospital called Peter MacCallum Center here, and it's a jointly supervised project. And again, this paper that we wrote will be published and it will be available in June 2023, and a completely new AI-based method to recognize the cancer regions without complete help of a human annotator, human expert. Okay, so some help, but not complete help. So remember the example I took, semi-automation, a symphony between humans and AI or machines. So it's a bit like that. It's in symphony with human experts, specialists in that area, and an AI, a very successful solution. So you can see from the authors here, there's a bunch of hospitals involved. And this paper is will be available in June. I was promised by the PhD student it will be available. Okay. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going towards the end of my talk, and we are also working with stem cells, organoids. Of course, we don't do any of that, and it's done by our collaborators, medical partners. And it's another paper already available on something very exciting, working on sicknesses like certain diseases that like Parkinson, like motor neuron disease, in that direction. Okay, so so this could be a quite interesting one if you want to. I mean, look at, again, you can see quite a large number of authors, about 10 hospitals involved in this, but the research is done in my lab and the computing research, but all the data preparation, the medical part, biological parts done in various hospitals. And final, this paper, and published in National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka journal last year. And this is with lots of Sri Lankan authors and from Sri Lankan universities. And we call it Interpretability and Accessibility of Machine Learning in Selected Food Processing, Agriculture, and Health Applications. So AI can be applied in food processing and food drying in particular here, and agriculture and health is what we're talking about here. I think I'll stop here with this slide showing that. So this is the slide that that I'm a little bit embarrassed by, because you would say, oh, this guy has done so many good things, very nice research, so many publications, citations and so on. And we cannot do that without the support of this generous funding from various sources and Australian Research Council, multiple companies, and Eurogene Biosciences is founded by one of my former students who came back to support our research, and Robert Bosch Germany, and POSCO South Korea, and very recently, and even though I don't work in defense, I would take money from them if they support my biomedical research, which is completely unclassified, publishable research. So they're helping us with the motor neuron disease area, and lots of PhD scholarships and external collaborators are acknowledged here. And thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Right. Thank you very much, Samad. I don't know how we applaud in a webinar, but anyway, right. I'm sure people appreciate what you said, a wide spectrum of things, I think, starting from some developing country problems in transportation and energy, then going to maybe some of the more high-tech sort of medical applications. So I think there must be many sort of domain experts here. I would like to invite them actually to participate in the question and answer session. I'm not going to sort of start or anything like that, just to encourage people, you know, to ask questions themselves, right? So either you can write out your questions in the chat, or you can maybe raise your hand if those of you who know to raise it, or you can just unmute and maybe ask your question. I think that that option is also available, but the organizers can contradict me if that is the case. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Sorry. Oh, it's available, right? So you could even just unmute and ask your question, or you could raise your hand to be prompted to ask your question, or you could write it in the chat. It's not Chat GPT, it's just a Zoom chat. And
can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
So thank you very much for this interesting and eye-opening presentation done by Professor Saman Halgamuge. I felt so proud to the place where he is in as a Sri Lankan. So thank you so much. Before moving on, I would like to give my suggestions. This is a suggestion basically on implementing AI in Sri Lanka. So when implementing AI in Sri Lanka, I'm narrowing down my scope to from developing countries to Sri Lanka specifically. So when it comes to Sri Lanka, normally we say data is the new oil. But what is the situation of data in Sri Lanka? So for example, we can talk about two aspects of data. One is the accuracy of the data, and the other one is the availability of the data. So as a country, what is our attitude towards data? So just imagine about the census. When did we do the last national census? That was in 2001. So as I remember, correct me if I'm wrong. So as a country, we are going through and taking all these decisions and doing all this strategical planning and everything without knowing what the real situation of the country is. So and also, if we don't have the accurate data, and if we don't have the necessary data with the required amount, what is the purpose of having a machine learning model? For example, to train a machine learning model or AI, for example, we need sufficient amount of data. So the availability of data is the one which put China in this race. The China and India ahead of America, as far as I'm concerned. So
shall we allow someone to respond to that, because that's a very important question about the non-availability of data maybe in Sri Lanka. Maybe there are other developing countries that he has come across, and I don't know whether there are similar problems or whether they have tackled them in particular ways. Shall we ask him to respond to that?
Yes, exactly, Professor Priyan. And there is another part. Then after Professor Saman's answer, I would like to continue that.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very important question. And so now let me tell you that when we work on that cancer project, the student in my group, and she actually trained her her deep neural network pipeline, so her invention, using data not related to cancer. So now I have to say that AI is a can-do technology. So if you don't have data, no AI. No, that is not the case. Machine learning has different modes of operation. So answers, so you can get a machine learning model and you can train it on available data, related data, right? And this is how we make smartphone application, right? For the smartphone application, we actually take that system and the machine learning model, we train this on a different set of data available. That could be from a different country, okay? So, and after that, then we can bring it to our own application for which we only have small amount of data. So we then fine tune using the real small amount of data. So now this is called pre-training. So if you have seen ChatGPT, right? The P and T refer to pre-training. So the ChatGPT is pre-trained using available data. Okay, so if I go and ask, you know, where is Saman, and it can answer because it is pre-trained using all sorts of data. So now that is only one answer. So then there are other technologies like few-shot learning that we are working on, and which does not need whole lot of data. Okay, so this myth that you only can apply machine learning if you have access to enormous amount of data, and that is why China is doing well. I don't agree with it, because and I don't know which country is leading AI, but I know there's quite a lot of really nice work happening in China, India, but also in other countries, in like Singapore, and it is the innovation and ideas. Okay, not data is important, but you can actually use other data. I give you an example. Famous example we use in our classes to teach students about this pre-training opportunity is that if we have a rare disease, rare skin disease, right? There are not many people who have rare skin disease, so we don't have enough data. But we create the machine learning system or deep learning system trained on rare diseases of the dog skin, right? Because there are plenty of dogs with rare skin diseases. We have data for that. We pre-train first. We're using that. It's somewhat related, okay? Not completely the same, but somewhat related. And then we use the smaller data set of human diseases on top of that, okay? It's like you want some master graduate on Sri Lankan tea production, but you take a science graduate from Peradeniya University who has a general understanding, and then that is pre-training, and then you provide a master's degree on top of that on the specialization. And that is entirely the common practice in AI today. Okay, so that's one answer. And the second answer is, of course, there are specific technologies which can work with small amount of data as well. So it's not an excuse not to use AI. So AI is a can-do technology created with can-do approach. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Saman. I will come back to Rajit because I would like to give an opportunity for somebody else who has asked a question on chat. So maybe Saman, you can see this question on.
Definitely.
Okay, Saman, you can see this question on chat as well. It may have interesting implications with regard to privacy issues. Can you see the question? Is it a good research to use machine learning techniques to identify examination malpractices using facial expressions, voice identification, head pose, and eye movement face area only. I think the question is whether it's a good PhD topic, and maybe I might add, would it be considered a violation of privacy, or is the student sort of expected to be scrutinized during an examination? Go ahead. Yeah.
I think this technology can provide some solutions to maintain the privacy. So you can create system which actually take your images and do all this analysis, but would not provide anything other than the data that is required, or the technology can be set in a way that you only provide this data to another system or supervisor when there is really a suspicious activity. Okay, so I think privacy is violated. I agree. So now, if you are going on fraud detection, and so there is some privacy violated, and only if you committed a crime. If you're not committed the crime, your privacy is preserved. We can set the system in that way, and that is partly socially responsible AI. This is why AI should be regulated. AI should not be used in a really bad way to invade people's privacy. That's for sure. I think we all agree on that. But if I'm committing a crime, then the tool should have the right to report me. I think that we can agree on that too, right? Yeah. So AI systems can be set up that way. Yeah.
Okay, I think the person who asked the question is wanting to sort of tap your, sort of pick your brain about whether it has potential for a good PhD project, this type of thing. So I don't know, maybe you want to comment on it.
I mean, there are already so many PhDs done in that space. Of course, I mean, PhD projects are, it's a big area where you can do hundreds of PhDs pretty easily, depending on the technique you use, depending on the specific instance you're talking about, and so on. So there's lots of research already happening, but there's a lot of room. So the simple answer is yes. But
right.
How do we specific? Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So I think Rajit wanted to ask something else. Maybe we can allow him to do that because there's nobody else wanting to ask questions. Rajit, yes.
Thank you, Professor Priyan. I totally agree with Professor Saman in what you have said. We can't justify inactivity due to not availability of data. That is totally true. In the case of training a model, what you are saying is right. But when it comes to implementation, for example, if we take a model from maybe from Philippines or Vietnam regarding alleviating of poverty, so we take that model to Sri Lankan context, and what is the data we are going to send in to that model? The model is available. I'm not talking about the accuracy of the model. The model may be 99% correct, but what are the data we are going to feed to it? We have data available which is available in 2001. So after 20 years, we don't know how much our poverty level is, how severe it is, what are the cross sections of it. So we can't depend on the decisions taken out from the AI model. For example, if we take all the decisions which are taking right now as a nation are depend on assumptions, not on data. That is a huge fact. So that is a continuation of what our discussions earlier had. And the second thing is the human resource related to AI. So it seems when it comes to artificial intelligence, in Sinhala we say Krutima Buddhiya. So it's a quite fancy word, something like a dreamy effect there has. But okay, so the other side of the river is quite lucrative, green, and all the resources and all the things are there. So, but if our youngsters want to cross that river to the other end of the AI, being a master of AI, so what kind of programs do we have? For example, the core of being an AI expert is mathematics. So what is the situation of mathematics education in Sri Lanka? It is very poor, to be honest. And to work in AI, you need to communicate with each other. There are so many parties you have to get involved with. There are parties. So in that case,
Okay, Rajitha, I think you have asked a question. There are others also who have been asking questions. Can we ask someone to respond to your comment about the resource, whether we have a sufficient background? Yeah, okay.
Definitely.
Let's ask him to respond to whether we have the basic sort of intellectual skills and training for people to take off in this area.
Definitely.
What are your thoughts on it? I mean, of course.
I start with the last question you raised, mathematics, and I don't think that Sri Lankan mathematical education, at least at university level, is poor. That's not what I'm saying. And we have just recruited someone from Moratuwa University, and I think his mathematics skills are superb. And and that's one thing to say. And so the second thing I would like to mention is that you need to be superb in mathematics to do AI. That is probably true if you want to invent AI. But if you want to use AI, apply AI, and you don't need to be a mathematician and you don't need to be super good in maths. You have to have common sense and understand what these tools can do. So now I'm going back to the question about not being done, census not being done. So there are things we cannot control. So that's true for everything. So we have two options. We can think about it and say, we cannot do it, we cannot do it, we cannot do it. Or we can see what can be done, all right? So if the census are necessary to feed into your AI tool, I would go and take a sample. I would take a small sample. There are methods in statistics that you can make estimations, and you can do various ways. You can take samples and make assumptions and create artificial data that are quite good to be used. So if I really want to do it, I have no excuse. All right, government is not an excuse. Not doing census is not excuse. Not having access to journals is no excuse, and because that is available. So what I'm asking my friends in developing countries to have is exactly that can-do approach. We can do it, right? There's nothing that should stop you, right? You have to go through the barricades, and no funding is no excuse. And there are things you can always do, and that is what I can see. And that is what I can see some people are doing and being successful in it, right? So that is my answer to that. So, but I agree, there's some problems that you cannot solve, right? But I can't solve it, but I can only encourage you to go around them, okay? Being successful, right? There's no other way a developing country can be developed if we actually wait for someone to come up and do census and government to come up and do right things.
Okay, Saman. Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry, I'm cutting you short a bit just so that you can answer other people's questions. So Rahul Attanage, he's a fellow of the academy. He's asking, what are your thoughts about using AI in Sri Lanka power sector demand analysis for optimizing supply side, spinning reserves and power mix, fossil and renewables and things like that? Have you seen examples of that being done? I'm sure you would have seen in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it is been done quite extensively, and we have even done some PhD projects in that area. So the demand analysis and in particular looking at the use of electric vehicles or any type of the charging devices with batteries that can get charged, right? And the influence of that. So, and also how do we optimize the power supply and the demand? This is an extensive area. There are companies actually creating commercial solutions, AI-based commercial solutions, a very advanced area at the moment. and still research being done. So the answer is, Rahul, absolutely yes, it can be done. And that is done everywhere in the world right now. Yeah.
Okay, another quick question from Litika Ratnayakar. Will AI affect the cybersecurity industry? I think maybe the question is asking whether, all of these safeguards can be I think that's what the question is asking. Yeah.
Yes, the answer is yes. There's quite a lot of things happening with AI and cybersecurity, and I'm not an expert in cybersecurity, but I know enough to say that not only the machine learning part of AI, which works with data, but there are also optimization aspects of AI that are really nicely applied in cybersecurity area. So I haven't spoken about this, the other part of AI, which is not completely dependent on data. And so in terms of model optimizations and things like that, it's been applied. So the answer is yes, but that's not my area. So I can't comment too much on this.
Okay, thank you. Tilina Jayatilaka has been raising his or her hand, I'm not sure. You want to unmute and speak? Are you still here with us? Tilina? Yeah.
Yes, yes, Professor. Professor Saman, it was a very informative session. So I had also put my question in the chat as well. So my question is, can you give your insight or your personal experience on how the rules and regulations regarding the AI is ratified in countries like countries in Europe and specifically in Australia, so that we can also have kind of early understanding on how to be ready with our processes. So can you, because I'm raising this question because my premise for the question is the COVID-19 came at the latter half of 2019, and I don't know about most of the countries, but as a country, Sri Lanka, I think we were not ready in terms of rules and regulations. We were using some quarantine rules which were about 20 or 30 years old, right? But we know that when we were in school or university, we heard that there were many kinds of diseases like swine flu, and many kinds of things were happening around 2009, 2008, likewise, right? Still then, there were no new rules were regulated or ratified, right? So that's my...
Okay, Tilina, I think you have asked your question. Why don't we give someone a chance to reply?
Very short answer, Tilina. You are absolutely right. But the good news is that if you actually search for the Artificial Intelligence Act, there's a web page. I put a photograph of that web page. And so it sounds a little political, and so it may be targeting certain countries, but if you actually look at the content of it, the drafted content or what is available information, that can give you a pretty good idea and about what we need to be careful of in the AI Act. It's a law, so you will be punished if you misuse AI, just like any other technology. So I would recommend you to go and have a look at it. And if not, then I can send you the link if you can't find it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. There is a comment by Maheshi Disanayake saying there are good AI-related community projects happening in Sri Lanka. I don't know whether you are aware of that, but she is asking what type of framework is needed to implement it at mass scale. Shall we ask her to explain, or are you aware of this one?
No, and AI-related community projects, this is fantastic to hear. This is exactly what should happen. So,
Maheshi, can you explain a little bit what these community projects are? Is she here? Maheshi Disanayake, can you unmute and tell us a little bit about these community projects? No?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. Maybe she'll come back later on.
what I can say is I get a lot of questions from some students from both public and private institutions in Sri Lanka saying that I'm doing this finally a project on this fantastic topic. Do you have a comment? Can you tell me whether this is the correct thing or not? So there are a lot more activities happening than you think in AI. Some are really at a higher level, and because they approach us because on our website, we say we do this sort of research, and students are doing finally projects on very new current topics, right? I'm very impressed by the amount of work done. Yeah.
There's another raised hand. There is no surname. It's Sanat P. I don't know whether it's Piris or Pereira or Paranavitana. I don't know. Sanat, can you unmute and ask your question?
Thank you very much. It's Sanat Panavan.
Okay.
Actually, thank you in the first place for this very insightful presentation. You have walked us through the entire spectrum of applications, very real applications, I would say. One of the biggest challenges that we have is the critical mass of personnel. So we need these personnel at different levels. I mean, you're referring to, okay, we need PhDs, we need masters, we need people who can work on AI and people who can use AI. So in terms of capacity building, do you have any examples in any of the countries that you have mentioned who are similarly circumstanced as us, with some general idea about the number of personnel that they have at these levels as a percentage of population?
Yeah, I think the first country that comes to my mind is India. So if you go to India, so you will see at a very high level the IITs, okay, and there are a fair bit of top-class AI done in those institutions, and key universities like Delhi and Jawaharlal Nehru University and so on and so on, and training institutions, universities, and then there are other levels of AI programming. So it's more like an extension of software development to work with the simple AI. So work with AI tools is not that difficult. So you don't need to deeply understand it. It's a ready-made tool. The code is available, and so you can learn Python. And let me tell you, there's some of these people, including some of the Sri Lankans, who wrote to me, and they have done free courses available from top universities in the world on AI. So there are courses you can do, and they won't charge fees. And they write on their CV, completed this program at this university. And that's a free course available, right? So Python programming it's a key programming technique used in modern AI today, especially machine learning. And there are, if you look at India, so you will see these different levels of training, and then most importantly, companies train their employees, right? And there are fantastic IT companies in India. I'm not talking about Google and things like that, but there are Infosys, for example, Indian-owned company, and they, if you go there, you can see the culture of innovation in these places. There are a lot Sri Lanka can learn from them, and even in Sri Lanka. So I don't want to name too many companies, but WSO2 is one that I'm aware of, and I hired people who worked in that company. There is an innovation culture in industry, and training people on different levels of AI. So there are a lot happening already, right? And it is what we can do is to recognize it locally and maybe learn from each other and copy some of these things. That's my answer to that. Yeah.
Saman, there are two different people asking questions. One is about applications in social science areas. I thought you mentioned some of them at the start, but the other one is about agriculture, which I thought you didn't talk about very much. I mean, just what kind of applications could you think about here?
Okay, so one application on agriculture is done in Sri Lanka was reported from my friends in Jaffna University. So if you look at the National Science Foundation article I referred to, I'm co-author of, and so there are some summary of applications you can do in agriculture, especially using image processing. There's only one application. So for example, to see whether the plants are diseased automatically, right? And some applications we have done here in Australia is to see whether the soil is dry in certain areas of the farm, and which areas of the farm the soil is less dry. So because water is expensive, how do we channel water to the driest part of the big farm, right? So that is some very sophisticated paper we have done a couple of years ago. And so there are lots of research in agricultural area on soil sensing and then processing those sensor information and controlling the diseases and checking how productive the plants would be, and also controlling not only the water but also fertilizers. There's a lot of very sophisticated things done in massive farming area, and in many other countries. Yeah.
Right. Do you want to emphasize? Yeah, social sciences. Yeah.
Yeah, very quickly. And the closest project we have in social sciences is we have a project looking into Indigenous people's water rights, and so in Australia. So but that is not the only project you can do. And social sciences, if you have data, then there are projects you can do using data. I'm not talking about a large amount of data, but even with small amount of data, the machine learning can be applied to analyze them. So one thing that comes to my mind straight away is what I call unsupervised learning. That means exploratory learning. So you have some data and you don't know what to do with it, right? You explore that to find out something. This is how you could find something like ozone hole. You don't know what you're looking for, right? And you see an anomaly, and then you, through AI says there's something wrong here. Then you look at that, and then you make sense. Again, this symphony between human and AI is important in there. So then that can lead to a discovery. And there's one strong area of social application that I can think of generally in social sciences, where data is available, or where there are surveys done, data are collected, and I know that some of the research involved conducting, designing, and doing some surveys, and that data can be processed using unsupervised learning or exploratory learning in AI. Yeah.
All right. So I'm not sure. I think this is supposed to be over at this particular time. I do not know whether the organizers will allow us to go some. But let's bring it to a close. There aren't any new questions. There's a last question I'd like to leave you with. The question asks, is there a good demand for AI graduates in Australia?
Of course, very, very high demand. Yeah. So at the moment, I can see that mostly the PhD graduates, I mean, is what I know. And but we also teach AI for master's level, and some universities even have AI programs in the world, the entire degree on AI. So and my university has lots of programs in the master's level, and and they are in high demand because almost every single industry needs to have an AI expert today, and otherwise, they cannot sustain, because it's penetrating every aspect of our lives, whether we like it or not. So there's a very huge demand. Yeah.
Okay, Saman, thank you very much. It just struck me, if I can have the last word on this. I mean, maybe just get your view on it also, especially with these things like, ChatGPT and these AI systems. Very often, especially in the future, people who succeed with AI are probably people who are able to ask the right questions, right? Because maybe the systems have the knowledge embedded in it, but you have to ask the right questions to tap into that knowledge. You have any thoughts on that? The whole question of asking the right questions, I mean, meaning what are the significant variables, that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so what is the significant variable is, if I start from there, and it's a question you can ask, or you can also let AI figure it out. So the new AI is different from the AI that I was working with 25 years ago, and where we actually did some of the things with our human bias to feed in. But modern AI would love to work with raw data to take out that human bias, because it is sophisticated enough to process the raw data in an unbiased way. So in a very summarized way. So people who are in AI would think about convolutional neural networks, for example. So we don't do pre-processing anymore in most data sets, because we let the machine learning system to have access to unpreprocessed raw data. And so that has become the trend, because whenever we actually go in and do our things, we actually include our bias. Sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes it's not a good thing. Yeah. Right. So you can ask the right questions, but you have to be careful in not including your own bias into the system. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Saman. Thank you for spending your time with us, taking us through your lecture and also answering these questions. But I think Vasantha will thank you in a more formal way, so I will hand over to him. Vasantha?
Yes. Yes, Professor Dias and Professor Halgamge. I think we have addressed all the questions. If there are any other questions that you need, please don't hesitate to send us. So we'll try to give answers to these. So before go to my vote of thanks, I would give some points with regard to this our webinar. One of the objectives of formulating our COIR subcommittee is to keep and make our society aware of the current global trends and alert them to the new developments. As mentioned earlier, it is a tool which comes under COIR. We noted AI will give huge impact on our society in the future. You may have seen this is a hot current topic in the media in the recent days. As human beings, we should value human qualities, capabilities, and skills while adopting new technologies and techniques like AI. There will be instances of ethical and social aspects to be addressed while adopting the AI by the future generation of our country, and finally to create wealth to Sri Lanka. We hope to provide our viewpoints to the relevant stakeholders and policymakers accordingly in the future. While noting these points, AI needs to be utilized by all the researchers, academics, and the other practitioners in the field to capitalize the benefits of this novel technique to our country. With these few concluding points, let me propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the NSF management. First of all, I must mention with gratitude to all who joined with us online for this event from different institutes under different disciplines. We noted you engaged in discussions, and interest and your enthusiasm is also clearly seen there. Therefore, it is very much appreciated, and big thanks should be given to you all. We should mention the support extended by the management of the NSF by providing all the support when organizing this event. Further, I must thank Chairman Professor Ranjit Srinaratne, Dr. Sepalika Sudasinghe, Director General, who gave us the directives and guidance to make this event a successful one. Our gratitude should also be extended to our resource person, Professor Saman Halgamge, for his informative, inspiring, and valuable presentation, and also sharing his knowledge with the fellow Sri Lankans as expatriate in Australia. Yeah, let me appreciate the effort made by Professor Priyan Dias to make this event a success, who also moderated this event as well. Also, Dr. Ruwan Weerasinghe, the chairman of the subcommittee on 4IR. We must not forget Dr. Ranil Gunaratne, the chairman of the working committee on S&T policy, who is with us providing visionary directives on these aspects. Let me thank all the other members of the committee for their advice. Thank you for the National Academy of Science and its president, current president, Professor Nadira Karunavira, for introducing and building up this linkage with our resource person. Many thanks to Mrs. Diloshi Munasinghe, scientific officer, who made a big contribution while organizing the event, and to the staff of the STPRD for their support extended to make this event a success. Finally, sincere thanks to the staff of the IT unit for their valuable technical assistance for this event and webcasting this event, YouTube live stream. Hope all you had very fruitful session with us. Have a nice day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right. Thank you again, Saman.
Thank you. Thanks very much.